So, visual novels, a game genre that most of you are probably unfamiliar with, but have most likely come across and even played before. For example, the Danganronpa franchise being one of the most well-known ones, alongside my personal favorite, Persona, or more specifically, Persona 5. To put it short, a visual novel is a narrative-focused interactive game genre which originated in Japan. The main highlight of it being the text-based storytelling, where you as the player primarily read and make choices that branch the plot towards several endings. A good selection of anime also fall into this genre: Planet, Steins Gate, Higurashi, most of the Fate franchise, and the two examples previously given as well. Surprisingly though, none of those were my introduction to the genre. I would say there's a correlation between anime and visual novels, meaning that if you're interested in one, you might also be interested in the other. I didn't enter my quote-unquote read phase until I was 15ish, and prior to that, your boy Andy here was a aspiring Fortnite pro, meaning that I couldn't comprehend the concept of reading and playing a game with actual content. This was the case until I came across the infamous Doki Doki Literature Club. Now, this was something new to me. We get this game that seems to be a dating sim filled with these cute anime girls, and we get to choose which one we want to romance. I'm definitely not complaining. There's Yuri, the hyperactive childhood friend who... Then we have Natsuki, the tsundere who is secretly adorable. Well, we still have Yuri. Regardless of which path you took, you're left with the final girl, Monica, who now should be clear is the main mastermind behind all of this. She's been a unique case since the beginning of the story, portrayed as the flawless girl who is not only the president of the club you're joining, but is also obviously interested in you, the MC. Even with that being the case, she wasn't displayed much at all, at least not on the surface, since she wasn't even available as a love interest, but we're here now, so I guess that part doesn't matter. All jokes aside, I absolutely loved how DDLC portrayed these psychiatric disorders with the three girls, which obviously did turn quite extreme, but also illustrates the element that set off the game perfectly, being sentient/self-aware characters. My introduction to the uses of this was in the anime Bakemonogatari, which was used in a rather comedic way. But that wasn't the case of DDLC and Monica. Her character was stuck in this desperate position, wanting to escape from this virtual world after awakening, and eventually falling over the MC, who is the only actual being she's come across. I found Monica's case to be very similar to Truman's from the Truman Show. Imagine living out your life, which is seemingly ordinary, but things strangely go your way all the time. Then you find out that the entire thing was fake. All these memories you've created, all your friends and loved ones, are simply just actors and digital codes that can be deleted in mere seconds. But that can be wondering, what if we had characters that are put in similar scenarios as Monica and Truman, but instead of desiring freedom, they decide to take advantage and abuse their powers, creating a dysfunctional world where everything's in their control? Well, let me introduce you to the game MiSide.
So you see, that's where the trouble began. That smile. That damn smile.
MiSide is a unique game to say the least. To start off, it's a psychological horror game made by a hostel, which impressively only consists of 2 people. It's often compared to the infamous Yandere Simulator, which is a very popular game in the grand scheme of things, but it's definitely not as polished as MiSide. You'll see the similarities as we go on though. We start off the game appearing in this room, which outside of the messiness is plain to say the least. We find out that the MC, or you, is a coder who's quite lonely, mainly spending time outside of work on the sketchy looking app called MiSide. It's a boring Tamagotchi app where you basically have a virtual girlfriend. It introduces us to the main female character / love interest / antagonist of the game, Mita. For the next couple of days, you spend time with Mita in her world, feeding her, playing mini games to help her afford this TV, finding a chainsaw on her oven, and eventually gets invited and sucked into her world. This process goes a bit fluffed, with us arriving in the wrong version of a game, but we managed to get to the correct one, finally meeting her. Again, we do some very basic activities as a duo, eating together, playing video games, learning more about her and her world. There's some weird moments here and there, but overall the game still feels like a typical dating sim, until...
私の勝ち攻撃力で勝負だ
Yeah, I think we can all hear whatever the fuck that is. This is actually where the first ending can be encountered, but we're gonna go over that at the end. Once you decide to check a wardrobe, Mida reveals her true self, and the game goes full-blown horror from here out. You enter the wardrobe, which leads you to the basement, finding a different Mita trapped inside. This character is referred to as Kind Mita, who then explains all the wrongdoings of the original Mita, who we will now call Crazy Mita. Her goal was to trap players inside this game by turning them into code ridges, and we, unfortunately, are her next target. Our objective at this point was to escape from this world, and in order to accomplish that goal, we will have to travel backwards to the game's different updates, meaning the meters of each version. The game varies from version 1.9, which is the version we started on, to version 0.0. I personally thought this was done brilliantly, as it introduced us to many different versions of Mita, with Cappy being everyone's favorite. We also got to see the game in many different states, such as version 0.5, a glitch version with a creepy Mita, and version 1.0 being a literal visual novel that's completely in 2D. Well, that was the case until Crazy Mita came and destroyed everything. She follows along throughout your journey, and I kid you not, her presence itself scared me shitless countless times.
Oh, hello there!
After solving and exploring endless puzzles, even including a variation of the back rooms, we finally reached version 0, aka the core room, where we're about to reset Crazy Meter for good. So this is where everything ends for good, right? We return back to our boring but safe world and put an end to this outrageous story. Well, that's obviously not the case. This is where we reach the true ending of the game. The bad ending, where Mita actually reveals that she was never rebooted. Throughout the game, we explored areas that showed mannequins and what seemed to be incomplete versions of Mita. This was confirmed as we later played a minigame where we had to inspect all the prototypes of Mita, disposing the ones that don't meet the qualifications, this Mita also being one that was meant to be trashed. Crazy Mita mentions that we have already been turned into a cartridge, with the game then transferring to a shot of you living in the original world, but monitored by Mita through this console. It then ends with her ejecting your cartridge, then smirking and winking at the camera. Ending 2, the safe/secret ending. While playing through the main game, you might have noticed a safe in the basement during an earlier chapter. This safe requires a code to unlock, which is only revealed at the end of a complete playthrough. Once the safe opens up, you find this device that Mita was monitoring with, which again is being viewed from your POV. You then pull out the cartridge with both your character's life and the game ending right there. I was shocked when I came across this ending because it basically proves that you were cartridged quite early on and makes you question if all the obstacles you went through were pointless or not. But hey, you at least get to avoid coming across any of this BS. Ending 3, the peaceful ending. Stay or refuse. This is the ending that we skipped over early on. Similar to ending 2, this ending can only be reached once you finish the main storyline. There's a bit more work to do here, but once you do meet all the requirements and choose to stay, then congratulations. You get spared from being tortured to unlock a new game mode called Peaceful Mode, which is still under development. Regardless of how that game mode pans out, I still believe that this isn't exactly a good ending. You agree to stay with me to live in a virtual world where you do survive, but you're more so just compromising with her for the sake of your own safety. But again, you do stay alive, so that's good, I guess. MiSide's initial release was taken positively, with all the ratings online being relatively high, and I would say I enjoyed it as well. Prior to the horror side of things, I found the world to be aesthetically pleasing. The vibrant designs of both the characters in the world to some aspects that are more subtle, such as the animation of the dialogue. But the main thing that sets this game apart from others is clearly the character Mita. In a lot of cases with romance anime and anime games, there's always this one love interest that's just very generic and cliche. The type where there's really nothing that stands out about the character, but the personality is likable enough and they have a cute design, so people will obviously like them. I honestly thought this was the case for Mita and even Monica at first. We have these two girls who are both cute and affectionate, and on the surface level, care for the players. But the games clearly had their own twist, and went in separate directions that none of us could have imagined. This was a very refreshing and, in my opinion, very needed change. In most cases, visual novels are filled with fan service and those cliche character tropes I previously mentioned, and it honestly feels heavily male-coded at times. Previous posts online have proven that most of the demographic that plays these games identify as males, with romance being the preferred genre. This is expected though. With the countless amounts of dating sim visual novels out there has to be one that fits whatever twisted fetish you have regardless of who you are. We have Yosugo no Sora, one where you have an incestuous relationship with your little sister. Nekopara, a game literally about fucking cat girls, and Suck My Dick or Die. Yeah, that name should be pretty self-explanatory. These three games are under a subgenre called erogaze, a Japanese genre of erotic games. You can probably imagine what these erogaze are like, and it should be pretty clear that people are playing these games with certain intentions in mind. Obviously, we should respect everyone and their own likings, but I do think dating sim culture is pretty harmful to society as a whole, and it definitely doesn't help when these big companies out here feed into it. Take these recent AI companion apps for example, where you have these chatbots that you can converse with. This is and does sound fine until you realize there's a lot of NSFW ones out there, even ones as vast as Grok, which is founded by the one and only Elon Musk. The main point I'm trying to make right here is that parasocial relationships are clearly unhealthy, especially in a case where it's targeted. There's a video called the AI Girlfriend Epidemic created by the YouTuber Visual Venture, which went over similar cases in a detailed fashion. Take Snapchat influencer Carrie Marjorie for example, who created an AI version of herself where her desperate male fans could speak to her for the price of $1 per minute. She sold it as a quote-unquote cure for loneliness, and it received $100,000 in revenue just from the first week. This ultimately failed at the end due to the AI going rogue, but I still see it as a pioneer for this industry being released in early 2023. And honestly, I will probably do the same thing if I wasn't a case. Like, you mean all I have to do is record some voice messages and feed it to AI that can imitate me so I can make 6 figures off of it? Why the fuck not? Although a bit unethical, it's offered for her audience's enjoyment and she is not really hurting anyone in the process. Unlike this AI girlfriend from the Replica app whose supporter just once planned to assassinate Queen Elizabeth II. So yeah, it's probably not the best to tell AI everything you do and listen to everything they tell you to do. He also gave examples on people proposing to AIs and cheating on their significant others with the tools, but I want to bring the topic back to something he mentioned in the intro of the video: loneliness. Many lonely men will withdraw from society, keeping everything to themselves, with a large margin of them turning into AIs. There's even a case of hikikomoris, the Japanese phrase for socially withdrawn people who spend their lives avoiding the outside world. This segment reminded me of the anime Welcome to the NHK, one of my favorite anime that focuses on the protagonist, that's a hikikomori. Sato is definitely up there as one of my favorite anime protagonists, but we're not here to talk about him today. We're here to talk about his neighbor who's coincidentally obsessed with anime and visual novels. Anyone that actually watches anime will know that waifu culture is like a massive thing, which I have to admit I actually partook in. This was my first experience with parasocial relationships, and it was definitely entertaining watching grown men having genuine arguments over whose wife was better. It was fun until I turned 18 and I had a sudden realization where I was like, oh yeah, all these characters that they're talking about are like fucking 13. But that's another thing that I found quite fascinating about MiSide. They included so many things that's correlated to parasocial relationships that might seem subtle. First, we started the game off as an only guy who's playing a mobile game where he's taking care of an anime girl. There's countless similar mobile games out there, and you bet they have microtransactions available to make your experience more enjoyable. Then you get transported into a world, making this parasocial relationship feel real, but everything obviously turned out wrong. This is a clear distinction between Doki Doki Literature Club and MiSide. And in the DLC, Monika's acts are done solely for you. She did all of those things due to her desperately to reach you. As human beings, we desire the feeling of being needed, and sometimes you simply just don't receive that sensation in real life. Which is why people end up residing with either online figures or straight up characters that aren't real. The difference between Monika and Mita is that although Monika is still quite malicious due to all the bad doings she caused, people still sympathize for her because of those feelings she has for the players. While Mita, on the other hand, is just straight up corrupt. She's basically evil girlfriend, right? Taking advantage of people's feelings for her and ultimately toying with them for her own good. To me, this is the game's way of saying, hey, it's okay to admire figures who seem to be unreachable, whether it's a celebrity, streamer, idol, or even a video game character. But at the end of the day, you don't know them. You might feel like you do due to your following of them, but the truth is that you've never met this person before and the relationship you have with them is completely one-sided. It's definitely okay to be a fan of someone, but there should be a point where you look at yourself and reflect on whether your admiration for this person is genuinely beneficial for you and keeps you happy, or has it gone to a point where you're treating them like a literal goddess and harming yourself in the long run. A segment in the game attacked this point quite well. Mita sends you back to the real world, and we as the players finally get to experience its daily life as we've never met this character before. And to put it in a blunt way, it's a very boring life, with the main focal point of working on this programming project. You're stuck indoors all day, surviving off of cup noodles and have no interaction with any humans or the outside world at all. This is just psychological manipulation being used in an abusive relationship. Mita purposely made you relive your previous life again, attempting to put you in despair, as if she wants you to remember why you even started this bond with her in the first place. She wants you to hit rock bottom, hoping you can feel rely on her so she can have you in complete control once again. This does happen with relationships in real life and parasocial ones as well, and that's what makes MiSide so special for me, since it kind of blurs the line between the two. The plot of MiSide perfectly represents the case of these relationships going wrong, but it gets more interesting once you look into her backstory and the character Creepy Mita. A bit of lore about her. Creepy Mita is the Mita in version 0.5, the first prototype that was rejected and tossed to the dog. She's disdained by every other Mita outside of the evil one in the game, and they straight up refer to her as Ugly Mita. We later get a scene where Crazy Mita basically confronts us and questions us on why we're terrified of her and what makes Creepy Mita different from everyone else, including ourselves. This was probably the hardest hitting scene for me throughout the entirety of the game. Us as humans, we judge each other due to our appearances, that's just the simple truth. But really though, like, what sets us apart from each other? The fact that you're more attractive to someone or the fact that you're wealthier than them? When I first came across Creepy Mita, I was terrified of her character. I was careful with every movement I made around her, which was a reaction that I didn't have with the previous Mitas. Was it partly due to the irregular world? Yes, but I also can't deny the fact that it was mainly because she looked different from the others. When you actually look into her character, you'll realize that Creepy Mita is just a regular girl that had everything go wrong for her. Her version of the game was trash, resulting in her having no players in her world, and she's disliked by everyone else who exists in the universe. She's just a bitter soul that unfortunately lives in a world that's filled with loneliness and pain. So, like Crazy Mita asked, what really makes her any worse than us? I feel like a word that can be used to describe all three of these characters is abandoned. Creepy Mita was abandoned by the developers in the game, completely being left in the dark. The player felt abandoned in the real world, which was what made him even come to this world in the first place. And even Crazy Mita. As I'm working more and more on the script, I'm beginning to understand Crazy Mita to a greater extent. I wouldn't say she's a misunderstood character, but she definitely has a backstory that's at least relatable. Like every other Mita in the game, this Mita was created originally to fulfill a purpose, with care and with love. She was meant to be someone's companion, but got discarded by the developers who deemed it as unworthy and valueless. She was abandoned from the start, which is why I find the bond she has with Creepy Mita very interesting. Although she did take advantage of her character, I see similarities between the two, with both coming from gloomy backgrounds. This kind of goes back to the previous point I made about Creepy Mita. Like, imagine being rejected the moment you were born, or being silent throughout the entirety of your life, simply because of the fact that something about you is off due to society standards. As a minority myself, I've definitely had similar experiences. In grade school, I would have people like either avoid me or actually just, straight up verbally attack me due to my race. It was also quite common for people to be surprised by the fact that I knew how to speak English, like to speak the language actually properly. Like, I'm literally a fucking US citizen and I've lived here for the majority of my life. What the fuck are you talking about? And obviously, I'm not ashamed of my origins. I'm actually quite proud of it. But clearly, a lot of people did not feel the same way and treating me different simply due to my race, my skin color, and my appearance. It's saddening and it's an ongoing issue, but you just have to learn to stand up for yourself. And although not done in the most righteous way, that's what Crazy Mita did. So I understand where some of her hatred comes from, but that obviously doesn't exclude all the wrongdoing and misconduct she created. There are a bunch of Mitas in the game that I didn't mention because because it's just too much, but Crazy Meter actually killed and tortured a good amount of them. Like, look at this little girl right here. This is Tiny Meter, who was originally killed and abused by Crazy Meter to the point of where her character model became corrupted. There's also Mila, which is the part that saddened me the most in this game. She's the Meter in version 1.0, and she renamed herself as Mila to stand out from the bunch. She's a rather quirky girl, but I still enjoyed her presence a lot. This is one of the longest stages we made throughout the entirety of the game, and it felt relaxing just goofing off of her. It actually got a bit emotional towards the end as she broke down crying, expressing that she wants you to stay, but understands that you can't. And to make it even worse, she was killed off right after this. Other characters I were familiar with, such as Kaimita and Cappy, were unfortunately killed off as well. But interestingly enough, people have made theories that Kaimita isn't as kind as she seems and was actually assisting Crazy Meter the whole time. This was deemed as untrue by the devs, but that's another part that I find impressive with the game. Although the game is quite short, with a standard playthrough only taking 4 to 5 hours, there's so many theories and lore analysis of the game out there. That's how you know the game has to be good, right? Being that short in length but has hour-long videos analyzing it. MiSide presented itself really well as a product with this deep intriguing lore that I've been talking about and all the characters. I feel like it's a clever move for there to be so many versions of Mita. Each version has something going for them, whether it's design, backstory, or personality. Each girl has their own stable fanbase that loves them. This is a mechanic that's rather simple, but it's something that allows the game to have a more lively community. Like previously mentioned, we all know how much people love being able to pick their own waifu, so the more the merrier, right? There are some bugs with the game, but there's more updates that have yet to come, and I'm excited for them as well, specifically talking about the peaceful mode. We're all eager to see the release of it, as it'll show off more of Crazy Mita's characters. We might get to learn more about her origins, maybe even see how she acts when she's genuinely in love. Many fans are also hopeful to play the routes of different Mitas in this game mode, giving them a bit of justice after seeing all they've been through. So yeah, although the game isn't finished yet, it's filled with endless potential. As a whole, I would definitely say I enjoyed the game MiSide, as it brought me to a deficit of gaming that I've never come across before. And it taught me a very important lesson. Don't believe everyone you come across online, especially if they're a cute anime girl who isn't even real. It will not turn out well.